and welcome to this talk about everything to do with coaching in the classroom. In the next hour or so, I will attempt to answer your questions. When I say attempt, I mean I will answer your questions. I will attempt to answer as many as I can. I've received loads of questions in the past months since I advertised this talk. And I have spent a little time putting those questions into 6 categories. 7 actually. The first one being, what is coaching? I think we have to define what we're talking about. There are lots of misconceptions about what coaching is and is not. So I think I need to say something about that. And if you have any additional questions, want more clarification, pop that into the chat. And again, if it works with what I've planned, I will add in an answer to your comment or question. I prefer questions to comments, and if I get comments, I'll try and turn them into questions. The other categories were to do with cost or time. Because when I talk to educators about coaching, they usually tell me 2 things. One, they don't have time for more work, and I completely understand that. No one has time for more work. And the second one is if they are interested, and usually this is a sign that they're interested, they say they don't have any money for it. And who does? Who has money for unexpected expenses? Schools are designed to do what they do with the minimum of financing. And when I come along and talk about coaching, if they have time to listen to me, they don't have money to pay for it. So those are 2 things I want to bring up. And just to be sure, I'm not trying to sell anything here. I've already sold everything I'm going to sell. But I might sell in the idea to you or your staff or your students, the concept of coaching in the classroom. That's what I'm at today. The other categories talk about the benefits. There are many benefits once you get coaching into the classroom. And to discover those benefits, you have to put coaching in the classroom. It's like catch-22 there. You don't know how good it is until you've got some, and you won't get some until you know how good it is. So I'm trying to let you know how good it is for you as a school administrator or a teacher, or if you're a student, you're listening in on behalf of your of your teachers at your school, and you want something to persuade them to become more coach-like. There's so many benefits that you can gain by adopting coaching in the classroom. And I will lean into my many years of experience of being a coach, coaching teachers, coaching students, coaching school admin, although not as many as teachers. I focused mainly on teachers. In terms of numbers, it's the teachers that I've coached the most. Out in the my colleagues in the coaching world, they tell me that they coach school leaders, school admin, and I can understand how they've come to that, because that's where often the top of an organization, that's where you start. But I used to be a teacher, and well, once a teacher, always a teacher. So I offered my services directly to the people that I used to work with, not side by side, but within the same branch. And they know that I know what they're experiencing every day, and they believe that I can help them. And that's really helped me to get in to schools. Anyway, so the categories, there are 6 categories after all. What's coaching and comparing that with teaching? If you have a question about that, please pop it into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer it. Costs in terms of money, cost in terms of time, but also where you can get the money from, and how you can create the time to get coaching into your classroom. And then you'll start to see the benefits. When I talk about coaching with an internal coach, that is a person employed at the school. I know this sounds very exotic for those of you who have never had a coach in your school, but there are people who are employed as coaches in schools. They may also teach, they may also be in administration, they may also be an external coach who's committed maybe half of their time to a particular school and is being waged, being paid for by that school on a half-time, part-time basis. I even know of a school caretaker. That's the person who goes around and sweeps the floors, cleans the toilets, makes sure the windows aren't broken, who's also a coach. I'll leave a pause there for you to imagine just the benefits of having some extra adult walking around the school with a mop and a bucket and a hammer and a screwdriver, bumping into students in an informal way, asking them, how are you doing? And actually having a mandate and the time to wait for an answer. There are other kinds of coaches, of course. There are teachers who have training, perhaps a full training to be coaches. They haven't changed their job, they're still teaching, but they've done the training course and they could technically start a company or start a business coaching somewhere, but their heart is where it is, and they're teaching. They're in the classroom and they're bringing the benefits of coaching directly to their students and their colleagues. There are admin, school leaders who've either experienced coaching and then trained to be coaches. Some of them have gone on to be certified as coaches, and it might be part of their career to do some years of teaching in a school, school administration, and then on to coaching in the corporate world, for example, might be. Some of them come from the corporate world. Oh dear. Some school administrators come from the corporate world, having become coaches, and go back into teaching as an administrator. They exist. There are people who do such things. And there are even people who have a military background. And I mention them because I've worked with them face to face here in Sweden. They have a leadership training and a coach training, and they come back into the education system in administration or even teaching, and they had such a strong set of skills as a coach that they're indistinguishable from a fully qualified, certified coach. And just imagine the benefits of having someone who's got this rock solid foundation of coaching added to a life experience of being in the military or in business or just in life, coming into the education system and being like a beacon, a lighthouse perhaps for students. There are also, goodness me, this is the seventh category I realized as I was speaking, students who coach. Now, they're not trained and certified as coaches in the same way as their teachers might be, but they have some coach training. And I've trained students myself. I know many of my coach colleagues have been into schools and given a little training to students, and they pick it up like that. They are so quick because it's natural. It helps them in life. It helps them help each other through the many challenges that a teenager experiences, all the way up through secondary school, their foundation years, college, university. They're able to step back from getting too involved in the problem and coach their friends. And, it's going to serve them extremely well in any relationships that they form. And certainly when they become parents, if they become parents, they're going to have a little bit of an advantage there when they talk to their children if they use that coaching approach. And again, I'm speaking from experience, having been a coach and a dad at the same time. My children will tell you, their mothers are counsellors. They've had it hard. And yeah, that's about it. Those are the 6, 7 topics I'm going to be talking about today. If you have questions that fit into those categories, add them now and I'll try to answer them now. If they come a little outside of that scope, I will, well, tag me in a post and I'll answer it. You can tag me on Facebook, you can tag me on LinkedIn, and if you have my email address, you can send me an email, and I'll answer you privately there. So, having got started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the difference between coaching and teaching. All of that intro was teaching. Why? Because I decided what to talk about, and I did all the talking, and I didn't hear anything you said. It's all that away. One way teaching. Now, obviously, as a teacher, I want to have a bit of dialogue. And as soon as I step into dialogue, I could step into the coaching world. Could, doesn't happen automatically, because if I'm in dialogue, conversation with my students, I could be asking them questions to find out how much do they understand? How much do they already know? What do I have to teach them? What don't I need to teach them? And that conversation would be in the teaching mode. It's two-way, but it's still based on my stuff. I decide what it is that we are going to talk about. Coaching, on the other hand, has a different purpose. I will be asking questions to explore what they know and what they don't know, for the purpose of them hearing themselves say something that's important to them, a realization, a deeper understanding, not of a topic, which I have behind me, but of themselves. So those are two of the big differences. Who gets to choose what we talk about? Teacher chooses, it's teaching. The student or the other person chooses, it could be coaching. The second part of that was questions. If I'm asking questions to check understanding, that's teaching again. If I'm asking questions to explore what they know and don't know, that's more into coaching. But you can hear, I hope, if you're a teacher, hey, you probably use questions to explore what they know and they don't know. But if you do it based on the topic that you're teaching, well, you're teaching. But if you do it based on who they are and who they are becoming and their issues and their dreams and their ambitions, then you're into coaching. As you might be able to hear from my voice, I have, how can I describe that? I don't want to call it native English because I've been living in Sweden for 30 years. Good God. Time flies. I moved here when I was 30 something. So I moved from England. So I'm English, I'm British. I have had until quite recently a British passport. And actually, when England or Britain left the common market, I signed up to be a Swede. I've lived in this country such a long time that I am a naturalized Swede. So you could describe me as born British, but I chose to be Swedish. It means, of course, that I understand a little bit more of the Swedish system, the education system, than I do of the English system. We do things differently in these two countries. And I would imagine if you are not from England or Sweden, that you do things differently too in your country. So there are some things that I might say you think, oh, that's going to be really difficult to put in my school, in my classroom. And I would then ask you to realize that you decide what goes into your classroom as much as your culture influences your choices. So you are at choice about whether you use coaching or not. You don't have to. You don't have to follow the culture either. One example of that would be the following. And I bumped into this in my early years in Sweden, because in the UK it's still, if I'm if I'm right about this, it's still okay for parents to smack their children. I'd have to look that up. If I was living in England, I'd have to look that up to see if it was okay. But certainly in my parents' day, yeah, whack around the back of the head was okay. In fact, it was expected. It was expected of teachers too. So I went to school during the 1960s, 70s, and corporal punishment was okay. In Sweden, it had already been forbidden, which means there's a whole generation of children who've grown up to be parents who wouldn't even consider smacking their children. The method they use, what they do instead, is talk with them. It's dialogue, which is worth thinking about. So, I'm thinking there that parenting might also be on the list of uses of a coach. Yes, parenting does benefit from a coaching approach. When I talk about coaching to teachers, some of the reactions that I get are, I don't have time for this. And they don't. Their timetable is full. Their lessons are full. If you have a class of, I don't know how many you have, but 30, 40, 50 students, sometimes more in different countries, how are you going to find time to have a conversation with each of them when you've only got 90 minutes or an hour or 2 hours to talk to them a week? So how do we fit that in? It's not a question of squeezing the coaching in. It's a question of realizing that you already coach. When your conversations switch focus from the topic to the student or students, then you're switching from teaching to coaching. So here's an opportunity to consider switching. Well, I used to be a math teacher. So for example, up on the board is a maths question, and some of the students haven't really heard my explanation. They haven't paid attention. And as soon as I finish telling them what to do, their hands go up and they say, what do I have to do? Or, I'm stuck, could you come and show me how to do it? I've just shown them 3 examples, but they were not paying attention to me, they were paying attention to something else. So I've gone from teaching about the maths topic, and now I'm into the world of coaching, or at least the door to coaching is open. I can coach if I want to. The way I would do that is I would ask the student about their understanding. What do you think we should be doing? What are other people doing? How can you find out what to do apart from asking me? Asking me is a bit of a cheat, a bit of a lazy thing to do. So how else could you find out what to do? Who could you ask? So giving them permission to ask the people around them, and certainly helping them in the moment to refocus, but also letting them know that they are in charge of where they put their focus. I don't want to be in charge of where they put their focus. I don't want to have 30 people to control like this. No. If I can get them to do the work themselves, obviously, it's a lot easier. Further to working with that one student, you're actually, because the student's in the room full of students who are kind of listening, and they should be getting on with their work, but they're kind of listening. If I'm coaching this one student, I'm also coaching the other students. So my coaching approach is to coach one in front of everybody. As long as the topic is not too personal, certainly not if it's private. When that happens, when you notice, for example, that a student's got their head down on the table and they're not paying attention, they're not getting on with the work, they seem to have checked out, that's the time to go up to that student very quietly, very calmly, and inquire what's going on. You don't want to include anybody else. Hopefully everyone else is so involved in solving whatever I put on the board that I can have a conversation with that student privately. Maybe book a time to meet them after class if that's required. Now, if it's not too private, if it actually refers to everybody in the room, then you can use that moment as a life teaching moment, if you like, a coaching moment, where you step back from the one student and use their topic, I'm tired, for example, to address the whole class about being tired. You will address the whole class, but you won't insist that they change focus from the maths lesson to the life lesson, because if they don't need it, they won't be listening. And if they're not listening, they'll be getting on with their maths, we hope. So it's entirely possible, even in a very large class, to coach an individual for the sake of everybody else. It doesn't have to be that they're tired. It could be that they're sad, that they are confused in some way. And you scratch the surface with the conversation just to see if this needs to be done in a one-to-one situation. At that point, it might be a good idea to bring in the school counsellor, because it's school counsellor's job to help students who are in turmoil in some way and unable to focus in the class. Now, the reason I mention that is because teachers' jobs are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and in particular there's a teachers' union here in Sweden whose slogan for the moment is "Let teachers teach." Basically, let them teach the subject from the board, let them teach, and let's take out all the problems. Somehow, we don't want teachers to be counsellors. But the thing is, students need counsellors. And if we can get a teacher to counsel a little bit, as you do anyway, maybe we won't have to send 20 students to the counsellor at the end of every lesson. That was something of an exaggeration, but when teachers lose contact with their students, there's more need for counselling services, whether it's brought in by people from the outside or whether it's a change in approach from the teachers. When I was coaching teachers, one of the things that helped a great deal was when I asked about their understanding of the student's situation, not their academic, not the mathematics or whatever subject it was. It wasn't about that. It was, what do you understand of the student's situation at home, in their community? What's going on for them over and above your lessons? And if they had, if the teacher had no idea, then the homework would be go find out, because when you understand how your students are experiencing life, maybe you won't be so disappointed when they don't focus on your maths lesson, because you'll understand what else is absorbing their attention, and you'll do things differently so as to attract their attention, so as to match your teaching level to their ability to learn. So I want to talk about the costs of training to be a coach, because I know there are people here who are going, yeah, but how do I become a coach? If I'm ready to become a coach, what do I have to pay? In general, the more you pay for a coaching course, the better it is. Not 100%, but if you buy a cheap course, and I've seen courses out there for, well, less than the price of a cup of tea. If your coaching course costs less than the price of a cup of tea, probably not a good idea to buy it. I needed that. If your finances don't stretch beyond a cup of tea, beyond a book of some kind, there are books up there. There are hundreds of books out there in the world that will give you some clue about coaching. They will give you information about coaching in the same way as a book will teach you about riding a bike or climbing a mountain or deep sea diving. I mean, they're going to feed your interest, but they won't actually develop your skill. You need to go on a course where you actually practice, for real, coaching conversations with other people and get some feedback according to some set of standards. Now, there are, let's say, blue standards and green standards and orange standards. They're all good, so long as you know what the standards are, you'll know how you're progressing. I've taken several kinds of courses with different standards, and I know the ones I like, they suit me very well. And I think part of the process of becoming a coach is doing the research, meeting different coaches, going on or reading different books, perhaps going on different courses to find which one of these is your colour of coaching. Once you've studied for about 100 hours, that's practice time, you will then need to practice another 100 hours with people who are not coaches and get some feedback from them. We call them clients or practice clients. You will then be in a position that's the lowest level, 100 hours training, 100 hours practice. You can work towards a certification. There are several kinds of certifications. There's the blue ones and the green ones and the, well, whatever other colours I mentioned. You should look at which ones suit you. You should ask around. And I could just tell you, boof, do this. But then you're not me. So, and it wouldn't be very coach-like of me to do that. However, I will tell you, just to completely confuse people, I'm a CTI trained and CTI certified CPCC coach. Well, there you go. Just a bunch of letters. My training is ICF accredited, and the ICF is just more letters to do with coaching. So there are others. Again, I won't go into all of them because there are so many. There are places where you can look these things up. How long does it take? A few weeks. If you're a teacher, you could do this over the summer. No, I'm not suggesting you do it over the summer. I'm just saying you could. You probably need a holiday, but you could train to be a coach during the summer, actually go from, where are we, June, July, where you finish your teaching for the year and come back in August, a fully trained and possibly certified coach. You'd have to work really hard to clock up 200 hours training and coaching, but it's possible. Probably better to do it slowly. For clarity, I took my training in 2004 and I took my certification in 2014. Yes, it took me 10 years to save up the money and the time to go and get myself certified. Can you coach whilst you're not certified? Of course you can. Can you coach before you're even trained? Of course you can. In fact, you probably are. To really get an idea of what coaching is, you're going to have to put your hand in your pocket and find yourself a professional, certified coach. Yeah, it costs more than a cup of tea to have an hour with a coach. How many cups of tea? 200? Something like that. Prices vary around the world, and buying power of different currencies changes from time to time. So have a look around, and my tip is reach out to the coach whose profile you like. You've looked at them on LinkedIn and Facebook and other social media and maybe their website, and you get a feeling that this person might be for me. Ask them for a sample session or a chemistry session just to find out if you actually are anywhere near matched, because there are as many different coaches out there as there are people. And that's something to bear in mind. The research of finding your coach is probably as important as the actual coaching, because it helps you form an idea of what you want from the coaching. Some people like directive coaches who would go against my training, but okay, never mind. They would be more assertive, let's say, a kind of typical PE coach that you might have in your staff. A sports coach, they can be very directive because they're also teaching you how to do the sport, how to perform the task. So they're more of a trainer / coach. And non-directive coaches who are a little bit more like a psychologist. They're more laid back, they're hands off, and they'll never tell you what to do. You'll never know what their opinions are because it's nothing to do with you. Their opinion is not useful to you. So if you find yourself looking for a coach who's got opinions, you'll want one who's more directive. If you find that the coach's opinions are getting in the way of your development, then you want a non-directive coach. And there's everything in between. There are those who will negotiate with you how directive, non-directive you want them to be, and they'll attempt to match you and your needs. Being coached by a professional coach is really the only way of finding out whether or not coaching is for you, and finding out the coach that suits you. Asking for a chemistry session or sample session, you can ask for free. Remember what you get for free? Difficult to value it if it's for free. So offer to pay a reduced rate. In fact, many new coaches who are in training, who are doing their first 100 hours, are looking for people just like you, who say, I want a free hour, I want to find out what you're like. So that could be a perfect match. Having established your coach, you then embark on a journey of some months usually, and you normally pay monthly, and keep going until you've either reached your goal or you've become independent of your coach. A sign that you no longer need a coach is that you are making all of the choices yourself. You shouldn't be becoming dependent on your coach. That's not a good coach. Back into teaching, students who study and learn on their own are easier to teach. And teachers shouldn't make their students dependent on them. So whenever a teacher can make the student work for the answer, not get it from the teacher, but get it from wherever, you've created an independent learner, or slightly more independent learner. And that's one of the benefits of bringing coaching into the classroom, is your students become more and more independent, as they're supposed to be, about what to learn, how to learn, where to learn, who to learn with, and that kind of thing. So in some schools, there is a person who's got a training and a certification perhaps as a coach, and they will go from class to class working with different teachers, focusing on how that teacher interacts with students, how they interact with the subject, how they interact with the parents, if that's appropriate, and giving support, which will be a mixture of instruction and coaching, so that the teacher can become even better in their work. It applies to new novice teachers who've just done maybe their teacher training and need a little bit of guidance to move into the school. It applies to teachers who've lost their mojo. And by that I mean they're still teachers, but they've lost something, maybe that initial enthusiasm, or they've just been there too long. I've met a few who really need a break. But, you know, if you become a teacher, you're always a teacher. And sometimes it can be difficult to take a different job for a couple of years and then come back. They would benefit from meeting a coach. I'm thinking now as I'm saying it, one of the assignments I got was with a very competent teacher. He'd been teaching for 15 years, and I think he was headed towards 50 something. And he didn't understand why he'd been given a coach. And to be honest, I didn't understand either. I was just given a name on a list, go and see this man and start talking with him about coaching. After some persuasion, he allowed me to observe a lesson. And when I sat down with him to do the coaching feedback, he suddenly realized that although he was good as a teacher, he'd become a little relaxed, and he did it his way, which wasn't a bad thing to do. I'm trying to describe him as a good teacher, but he suddenly realized there's so much more he can do when he focuses more on the students than he does. He knows his subject inside out. So he experimented a little bit with some new ideas, which was, in his case, it was group work. Maybe you do group work all the time, but he'd never done it. He'd always done a kind of lecture format. Very knowledgeable, very funny to listen to, hopefully as funny as I am being right now. He entertained his students, who would then go away and study for the exam and do very well in the tests and the exams. But when it came down to how much they understood, how much they really understood, it was minimal. He was a bit shocked by that. So he decided to fold the learning into groups and manage the groups. He still had moments when he would teach, but there was much more coaching involved in what he was doing. Hey presto, you could see now he had another 10 or 15 years to develop skills in the group coaching / group teaching world of teaching. Anyway, internal coaches can help with that. They are sometimes very experienced teachers who share their decades of experience. They can also be external coaches who've been brought in on long-term contracts, like I was. It could also be a member of the administration who've learned to coach, who've done their 100 hours of training, who've done their 100 hours of coaching other people, and are on their way to being certified. And the power that they have, the authority that they have in their school, helps them to get into classrooms and impact the teaching that's going on. Also the learning from the students. So they can sometimes work with students and sometimes work with teachers. I met a head of school. He was taking me for a walk around his school. I was there as a visitor. I was fishing for custom, and we encountered 3 older boys. This was a college with 3 year groups. These were in their last year, and they were standing by a cupboard, looking into the cupboard and watching a video. Now, I don't know what was on the video. I don't think we ever found out. But the head asked, "What are you doing?" And he asked in full curiosity. I mean, you could hear in the tone of voice. That triggered me like, okay, he's asking as a coach. He's not there with his authority, which he still has, but he's not using it. He asked, "What are you doing?" And the boys were embarrassed. "Oh, sorry, sir. All the usual excuse. He said, "Look, you're the older boys here. Set an example. Show me how you want to be." And they straightened up and they smartened up into their language and their body language. And they made their apologies. And then they went about their day empowered to be 3rd year grown-up students. Oh, that was really great. He could have gone in there with a waggy finger and, I'm the head teacher, you will do as I say. He could have blown the whole thing apart. But he chose to give them a chance to grow. And I think you see a lot more of that in the classroom when the teacher is trained as a coach. You never have to worry about discipline. Maybe that's a little bit of exaggeration. You seldom have to worry about discipline. It's always there at the back of your mind. But if you get into a conflict situation, an argument situation, and you're using your authority, you can end up in a fight. Verbal or physical, depends where you are. You can avoid all of that by using your curiosity. Now, you probably already do this. You probably, of course, you don't go in head first, you go in heart first, and you inquire as to the nature of this confrontation that they're having, and if you can be of assistance in some way. Obviously, if somebody's hanging a younger student out of the window on the third floor, you're not going to get into a chatty conversation, you're going to intervene. There are times when you don't coach, that would be one of them, and there are others, of course. But generally, you can coach a little bit or a lot, depending on the situation. As long as they're not pummeling each other or with sticks or fists. Probably got space for a question that's more an inquiry than anything else. And it gives the students the opportunity to reflect on their behaviour in such a way that they can choose to change it. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. If you can get them to do the work of changing their behaviour, you won't have to do it for them. And how could you possibly do it for 20, 30, 40, 50, however many students you've got? You can't be there all the time. But they are there all the time. And they can be there all the time for each other. I have trained students in coaching skills. How long does that take? Less than an hour. In fact, 40 minutes of active time. I was new to the students, so a little bit of getting to know each other was necessary. About 10 or 15 minutes. Once I got them to trust me, I invited them to learn about coaching. It was more to do with how to support a friend who's got a problem that you've never had. So your friend at school might have a drugs problem that you've never had, or might have an issue with a brother or a sister, and you've never had that problem. Or they might have parents' issues, and you've never had problems with your parents. How can you possibly help them? In fact, not having had the problem makes it easier. So I got them interested in learning coaching skills. I taught them a set of questions. I actually have them here. No, I'm not selling anything, but they're a little pack of cards. That's how small it is. In fact, I used 3 packs for 30 students, and I shared them out, and they were able to ask these questions of each other with a fictional situation that they may or may not be experiencing at home or at school. And it took 20 minutes for them to do one coaching session, talk about that, do another coaching session, talk about that. I got into the last 10 minutes. I asked, what use would this be? And they just fed it straight back. That they now feel that they've got the tools they need to help a brother or sister or classmate who's having trouble with something that they know nothing about and have no opinion about or even thoughts about. And would even help them if they have had problems of the same nature. They just set aside those problems and just stick to the questions. Make a connection with your mate, listen and ask those open-ended questions. And they picked up coaching within half an hour, 40 minutes. And the last I heard was they were able to take coaching with them into their further studies because their teachers knew that they could coach. So they would ask, what would your coach say about this? It's a brilliant question. What would your coach say about this? So they begin to coach themselves. As well as each other, they coach themselves. But it always takes a little bit of money to get yourself started. Even such a simple thing as this, I mean, it costs a little bit of money to buy in the questions or buy in the book. And where do you go for that kind of money? Now, as I said at some point, I'm based in Sweden, and Sweden's part of the EU. So we went to the EU. We wanted money from the European Social Fund to support schools that were in need of support. It could have been for 100 different reasons. Of those reasons were, I'm just trying to think what there was included. They wanted to teach the students Swedish because many of them had come from other countries. So we have a lot of refugees. They don't speak Swedish. If they can't speak Swedish, they can't take part in the lessons, which means they're not learning. So there was a push around supporting schools that had a percentage of students who were immigrants needing to learn Swedish. Similar was the push around mathematics, because as you know, everyone hates maths. I'm a maths teacher, and that's what everyone tells me. So they were around changing the opinions of students that maths was hard. So working with teachers to give them a different set of tools. The issues being, if you're good at maths, you might become a maths teacher, which means you've never had big troubles with maths. You've never thought it was, horrible or hard or impossible, but your students do. So you live in a different world. And no amount of teaching them more maths is going to help. You need to step away from the subject, a step towards the student, and then you're coaching. Excuse me. So there was lots of coaching going on, lots of supportive lessons going on that have more to do with the student's specific situation rather than the topic or the subject that was being taught. So we wanted money to coach teachers. We had a plan that included 8 hours of coaching and lesson observation, and the teachers could choose the balance that they wanted. We had to sell in the idea, so a talk rather like this one would be given, and those teachers who were quickest, most in need, approved by the head, would get a coach, a private coach. Quite revolutionary, because most of them had never had a coach before. The cost was covered by the government, who got money from the European Social Fund. So I kind of hope that whatever country you're in, there is somewhere to reach out for the large sum of money you will need to pay coaches to come into your school and do all this miraculous stuff. However, if you don't have money right now and you're making your application, maybe it takes half a year, who knows, you might want to do something straight away. So if you reach out to your local coaches through your local business association, for example, and say, we're interested in what coaching has to offer, would you like to come and give us a talk? Almost every coach that I've spoken to says, yes, I'll give a talk. Don't worry about the money. I used to be a student. Or I used to have a favorite teacher and I owe you. Without that teacher, I wouldn't be who I am today. So yeah, give me a chance to come and say thank you. Not the same teachers, of course, but teachers are teachers everywhere. Many, many coaches have a very generous approach to sharing what they know about coaching, and they have experience of being taught, not of teaching, that's a little more unusual. They will be very happy to come and give a talk to the parents, to the teachers, not as teachers, but as human beings. What does coaching have to offer? If you can persuade that coach to do a demonstration of coaching, two things can happen. One, you're going to get a really clear idea of what coaching is, and that might mean throwing away some old ideas because you might have seen it out on social media or TV. You may have got an idea of what a coach does, but to see a real live one do their thing, yeah, now you know. And of course, for the coach, they may get some clients, but that's by the by. The other thing is you'll know what you're talking about. When you talk about coaching, you'll know where on that scale of directive, non-directive coach, where they are and where you want them, your coach, to be. Your coach for yourself, or your coach for your staff, or for your students. You could also ask coaches to come in and give a talk to students, particularly the last year's, final year students. Talk about careers or something. Why did I become a coach? Because they will generally talk about the benefits of having this coaching approach, this coaching mindset, a coaching leadership, a coaching way of parenting. And you're going to get some ideas about how coaching could be used in your classroom. In fact, the way that my colleagues and I presented coaching to teachers was to do a coaching demo. Having established what coaching is, rather like I said before, it's walking away from telling and showing and giving instructions, working more towards asking and eliciting. If you elicit, as a language teacher, you're doing this already. You're eliciting what you need to have from that client. Then you have a good idea of what coaching is. Bringing that into a coaching demo, we didn't explain very much about what coaching was. We just gave them the demo and let the teachers work it out. And every time we did it, I think our demonstrations were more and more relaxed, because we knew that we didn't have to put any telling into our coaching demonstration, because the teachers are very good at deducing from what they see and hear what coaching is and isn't. So at the end of the demonstration, my colleague would demonstrate, or I would demonstrate, and then we'd swap. And the other of us would ask the teachers, what did you see? What did you hear? What did the coach do? What did the coach not do? What kind of questions were they? And within minutes, we've constructed the outline for the training course that they would possibly go on if they were going to become a coach. The teachers are great like that, because they always listen at two levels. They listen for themselves, but they also listen for their students. Or if you're in admin, you'll listen for your staff. So it both goes to your head and your heart. So a good coaching demonstration, whether it's done for the staff or the students, you're going to learn a lot. So I want to talk a little bit about how to get an internal coach. And as I mentioned at the beginning, they don't have to be employed as a coach. They can be employed as something else. They might be a counselor, counselor's coach, but they would have to have a training of some kind that allows them to coach as well. I think most psychologists could use coaching. Yeah. It's a kind of skill set that's included in a lot of different areas. The question is whether or not they have permission from anybody to go coach. And an internal coach would then wear a label that says coach. You know, I'm an internal coach at the school, I'm allowed to ask you these kind of questions, or at least I'm allowed to start a conversation that has coaching intentions. I may on a Wednesday actually go there and teach music or something. I've seen teachers, experienced teachers, become coaches. I've seen ex-military, people from the corporate world come into schools to coach. It's a way of using that skill set and giving back. There are a lot of adults out here in the world who aren't necessarily teachers by day, who would love to give their thanks to teachers and students. I personally volunteer at, well, not just one school, actually it's several schools. I sit in the library along with my colleagues, and we give support with homework, and it's definitely a hands-off situation. I literally sit on my hands for the most part. And when the student asks me, how do I do so-and-so, I ask them, well, how else can you find out? Because they've asked me, but I could just tell them, but I'm not allowed to teach, so I don't. I ask them, how could you find out? And they, oh, look, it's in the book. And, oh, this is what the teacher said. I made some notes. And who else has made some notes? And how much do you understand? And slowly build up. And suddenly you'll find they don't need us anymore. Well, not for that anyway. They've learned how to do the research themselves, which is great. They can go back to school the next day and ask their straightforward questions and ask to be shown how to do things again if necessary. But our support there is more of a coaching nature. I coach in subjects I've never taught. I've never taught Swedish, for example. and the students get the difference between a teacher, they meet at school, and we call ourselves like learning or lessons support or something like that. We help people with their homework. Most of it is like being there for them. There's 5 adults in the room, and we just say, come on, every now and again, come on. The noise goes down, and the kids are there voluntarily. They've come for help. So using that approach, actually, I wish there was a job like that. But anyway, that's another subject. So that would be kind of an external coach coming into a school to support students, perhaps with learning difficulties, although you might have a specialist to do that. If not, you can always bring a coach in. Yeah. So one of the things, maybe just to round off here a little bit, school admin who may or may not have been in the classroom at other points in their career. People come into school admin without ever having stepped in a classroom, apart as being a student. And they can bring in habits from corporate world, they can bring in habits from sports world, depends where they've been. And if they bring in the coaching approach, you'll notice the conversations that you have with them are a little bit different. When they ask you how you are, they have the decency to wait for an answer. You meet them in the corridor and they say, "Oh, hello Martin, how are you doing?" And they have eye contact and they're waiting for you to dig deep and come up with an answer. They don't want, "I'm okay." Well, if you're okay, you're okay, but they don't want to dismiss okay. They're giving you the space to say, "It's a struggle. Oh, so how can I help?" They have learned the skill of spending time here and now, 5 minutes here and now, 10, 15 minutes here and now, so as to make sure that the problem doesn't get any bigger. Because if they are very dismissive of you, "How are you doing? Oh, by the way, I need you to do that." Ooh, they're not listening to you. They're not paying attention to you. So there's a wall between you. People who've been trained as coaches, who've come into the teaching world, know the power of a pause. In fact, one of the head teachers I worked with, she had it's a shop credit card. It has a certain amount of value, money value, and it can only be used at that shop. And whenever she found that a teacher was stressed out, in need of ventilating, as we call it, she'd give them this card, or give them this card and say, "Go have a cup of coffee, have a slice of cake, off site," because you sometimes need just to get out from under the roof of your school. And she would pay for that tea and coffee and cake because she knew that little investment meant that the teacher had ventilated about their problem off site with a colleague, and they come back much relieved, much improved. And it wasn't the quality of the tea or the coffee, it was the fact that the head cared enough to spend a little of what was in short supply, money, knowing also that they could take the head teacher with them on such a conversation. They didn't have to be having a conversation that was sensitive under the school roof or in the head's room. They could go off site. Yeah, there's something about changing location that really helps. And you'll notice that if you've got a coach, you will go to them, or you'll be online, sometimes by phone. It's always good to make sure you've got a quiet space, nothing of the usual around you that can bring you back to that's the problem. Step outside. Final word on students, I think. Students, coaches. This works at university level. It works at college level with students in their late teens, early 20s. I've seen it work with 16-year-olds, but that's about my experience with teaching. I have spoken with primary teachers who say it works just as well with 5 and 6-year-olds, and I can believe it, but I haven't personally experienced it. I think I'd like to watch younger people, really young people, become empowered through being able to pause, ask the right question, and wait around for the answer. Yeah, that would be wonderful. So it would stop so many fights. Okay. To round off, if you have any more questions, put them into the chat. There have been a few coming up to cheeky questions and a few very nice congratulatory comments. Thank you very much for that. And I will get back to you all over the process of the coming week. I have another talk coming up in September. Can't remember the date, but look out for me on social media. I have a whole stack of books you can go look for. I'm not selling them. I'm not giving them away either. You'll have to find them for yourself, because half of coaching is taking control over your own life and helping other people take control of their lives. And that's what I write about in my books. Thank you for listening.